Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Fazbear Entertainment would like you to put your hands together for the one, the only, Freddy Fazbear.
Rewritten!
Are you okay? Gregory, answer me, please!
The tiny voice on his wrist brought him back to reality. He didn't want to react, though. He was still staring down at Roxy. He was so tired. He wanted to fall asleep right here. He almost did, if it wasn't for Freddy's voice.
Gregory, please, say something, please!
He laughed a bit, not really sure why he felt the need to respond. He was supposed to be just a robot. Nothing would change if he waited a few more minutes to regain his bearings. But somehow, Freddy felt more real than his actual mother. Freddy cared more than his actual mother. Gregory didn't want one of the few people who cared about him to think that he was hurt. Not for a moment. I did it, Gregory stammered, breaking out of the paralysis. He pulled himself back to safety, sitting up and leaning heavily against a wobbling elbow.
Gregory, was that you?
I did it, he repeated, voice crackling dully in his ears. I did it. I won.
Are you hurt?
No, he said automatically, thoughts trailing off a bit as he casted his eyes around the empty arena. No, not empty. Roxy hadn't been the only threat.
Oh, thank goodness, Freddy said, gushing with relief. What was all that? What happened? I heard Roxy screaming something.
She tried to kill me, Gregory said, words hollow. He thought that he should be more upset, but the emotion wouldn't come. She did? She chased me, he explained. She was gonna... All at once, the emptiness was filled with freezing cold, like an avalanche. He was crying, finally.
Freddy, she tried to kill me!
He wailed, not ready for all the emotion to come back just yet.
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. She was chasing me and I was so scared and...
Oh, no, it's okay, Gregory, Freddy rushed in. You're okay, you escaped her, right? You won, you did so well! Gregory hugged the arm with the watch close, shaking too bad to speak anymore. He pressed his head into the wrist, trying to draw some sort of warmth from it.
You did so good, superstar, Freddy told him. You're okay now, you won. I knew you could do it. Just come back to the exit and stay there. I'll meet you there. Can you do that?
Gregory nodded. Yeah. I might take a while, Freddy went on. Just wait until I get there, okay? Okay. Desperation seized him, making him yelp.
Wait, please!
What is it?
Can you stay with me?
Gregory whimpered.
I'm scared.
Of course, Freddy reassured him. I'll be right here the whole time. Just get to the exit. Gregory nodded again, swallowing down the tears. He tried to get up, only managing to fall over onto his back, staring up at the pitch-black ceiling. You're okay, Gregory. You're going to be okay, Freddy told him. His body wasn't working quite right. He was shaking all over. His bandaged foot didn't want to support him. Gravity kept on increasing in waves, trying to tie him down where he was. He almost decided to lie there a few minutes longer, but then the memory of the white rabbit, of Vanessa, came to poke him into motion. Groaning, Gregory heaved himself up and braced against the goal point. Only 2 goals out of the whole arena were lit up red. He shot the one that he had climbed on first, turning it red, with the same announcement of the red team getting a point ringing out. All the way out, Gregory listened to Freddy, drawing strength from his voice. Everything will be all right, he said. You're more than halfway through now. You've been so brave. It's almost over. He practiced caution as he headed down the ramp, legs unsteady. He slowed as he reached ground level, looking out at the maze. The arena was totally quiet, a burnt-out husk. He half expected Vanessa to lunge out of the darkness and pick up where Roxy left off, but she never came. He snuck along the halls, tripping over himself, stopping at every corner. Nothing. It made little insect claws skitter up his back. Something was lying in wait, something just out of view. She could be right around the next bend, right there, and he'd walk into her. But he didn't. He listened to Freddy. It made him feel better, even if he was just repeating, "It's okay, you're okay, you did it," over and over. It helped remind him that he had at least survived this far. Gregory snuck along, making it to the 4th goal point without problem. He shot. It turned red, the announcer declaring a 3rd win for the red team. He steered away from the mirror maze, instead heading to the tunnels area. He crawled in through the tight, cramped spaces. Even though the white rabbit couldn't fit down here, he stopped at every corner. Nothing. He shot the 5th goal point. Finally, he circled back to the mirrors, foot throbbing painfully. His heart twitched feebly in his chest as he approached. His feet stung, his eyes stung, everything was sore and empty, his foot feeling worse than ever. "You're almost there, Gregory," Freddy told him. "Just one more." He stopped at the first mirrored wall, staring into his reflection. He looked awful. Sweaty and pale, his hair in oily disarray, eyes shadowy hollows. Sweat soaked his filthy shirt, the shine of it on his forehead and nose, too. He was covered in bruises, carpet burns, and little cuts that he didn't even remember receiving. But alive. Still alive. He smiled wearily, giving himself a little wave, and then went on. He stopped, looked. Nothing. Stopped, looked. Nothing. He made it up the ramp in the silent, reflecting halls, escorted by dozens of his own hunched reflections. He shot the final goal point. "Red team wins!" The announcer bellowed, the sound of dinging match bells playing over the loudspeakers, echoing harshly against the walls. "Tough luck, green team! Please exit through the main entrance and place equipment back on the respective racks. Do not leave any personal belongings or waste in the arena. Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for accidents caused by items left in the arena between matches. Hope to see you again soon, recruits!" "Oh, there you go," Freddy cheered beside the announcer. "That wasn't so bad, see? Now you can come to me." Done. It was over. Gregory found himself walking along the halls again, turning corners, passing intersections, his mind drifting much too far away from his body, like he was watching himself as a ghost. There he was, slumping around the maze in a heavily limping gait, trying to find his way out. The only thing that felt real was Freddy's voice. He laughed a little as he went. His stomach rumbled and ached, his throat parched too dry to swallow properly, dizziness swooning through his head. He felt bad. Really bad. Footsteps. His head lifted, having the sense to stop. He listened. They might have been his footsteps. He wasn't sure. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. Focus, focus. This wasn't over. He still had Monty to go. And Vanessa? He stayed where he was for several minutes, too scared to move. Eventually, though, he continued. Finally, after several wrong turns, he made it out of the arena. The tension in his gut began to unwind whenever he caught sight of the doors, raising the watch, saying through it, "I made it, Freddy." He left the arena, set the vest aside, pushed out the doors into the lobby. But nobody was there. Nobody except, "There you are!" A large metal hand closed around his wrist, murderous red eyes filling his vision. He shouted something, fell limp, tried to pull against her. She clamped her other hand over his mouth, silencing him. He scratched at the back of her plated metal knuckles, digging his heels into the tiles, but it did nothing as the white rabbit dragged him away. He had nothing left in him to fight back. He pulled, he kicked, he thrashed. He tried so hard to get away, but he was so exhausted at this point, he couldn't muster up anything that would even come close to fending her off. He was dragged away from the lobby, off into the dark halls, the world spiraling around him. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't. Not after all that. The white rabbit stopped, opened a door, and finally let go. He was thrown into a dark room full of piles of things. He stayed on the floor, quivering, crying, lifting his head to turn and see her. "Congratulations, you just nominated yourself to be the second test subject," Vanessa said from within the rabbit suit's blank expression. With that, she slammed and locked the door, the light extinguishing for good. He lied there in the dark, unable to believe that this was happening. He couldn't see, he couldn't hear. Maybe he'd fainted. Maybe this was all just a bad dream. A sob reached his ears. It was coming from him. He wasn't dreaming.
Freddy?
His little voice crackled out, speaking to his Fazwatch. No response. He fumbled towards where the door should be, feeling around blindly, finding the handle. He pulled on it, trying to pry it open, but it didn't give for him.
Freddy!
He said, rattling the doorknob harder.
Freddy, where are you?
There was no response. He dragged himself down to the bottom of the door, overcome with despair. He reached to his watch, trying to turn it on, but his finger was cut by a sharp edge. He winced, bringing it up to the sliver of faint light from behind the door, trying to figure out what had happened. Gregory realized with sinking dread that the Fazwatch was completely broken, the skin beneath it bruised and throbbing. Vanessa had crushed it whenever she grabbed his wrist. No, he spilled out, still trying to tap the crumpled piece of useless plastic, not knowing what else to do. No, please, Freddy! All that accomplished was digging the sharp edges of broken glass deeper into his arm. He shakily removed the Fazwatch, the sting of the cutting bits barely registering to him as he peeled it away and dropped it on the carpet, letting the shadows swallow it up until it was gone from his sight. He just stared at where it disappeared in complete disbelief.
Help!
He screamed one last time, his raw throat tearing with the pained sound. Nothing. He slowly began to sink down, the awful truth dragging him into hopelessness. Freddy wasn't coming for him. He was alone. For the first time this night, he was completely alone. A violent, intrusive thought punctured the barrier that he had tried to keep up this whole night, feeling like a bullet to the throat. He was about to find out what Vanessa did to James. Gregory started to break all over again. Every beat of his heart grew louder and closer together with each passing second, his lungs following that same pace, everything around him becoming a blur as hot tears began to pour down his face. But he didn't make a sound. There was no sobbing, no hiccuping. It felt like his esophagus had seized up, the rest of him paralyzed, staring down into the darkness in that half-fallen position. He couldn't feel anything. Just felt empty, numb. Even though he was crying, the rest of him just wouldn't react to it, like he had grown some sort of immunity to it. He was so tired of running for his life, so sick of this stupid mall, so hateful towards Vanessa and her generic evil plan and how she thought that she could ruin his entire life with no consequences. Why did she think that she could do this to him, to James? It was just like the laser tag arena. This wasn't fair. It was not fair. He wanted to kill her. Gregory closed his eyes, gripping the musty carpet below him, trying to block everything out. He couldn't cry anymore. He just couldn't. Images of Chica's broken face, of Roxy's melted eyes, came back to him. He had done that. That same pressure was still there inside of him, the rioting need to survive rising louder and louder with every beat of his heart, turning all of that withering fear into boiling anger. He couldn't let himself become a helpless little kid. That was what made children go missing in places like this. Gregory dragged himself up, trying to feel around in the space for anything that he could use. The darkness seemed absolute at first, like he was trapped inside a black hole, but now that his eyes were adjusting, the thin gray outline of the rectangular door began to glimmer past his broken Fazwatch, the edges of various things fading into view. There was something further to the right and left walls. He began to slide his hand along the wall, taking deep breaths through his nose as he shuffled along in the shadows, a rush of heat overcoming him, his thoughts getting so loud it was hard to hear his own footsteps. If this stupid lady thought that she could kidnap him too, She had another thing coming. Gregory finally bumped into something, swiping his hand over the object as he tried to get a feel for it. He felt a wall of interlocking twine. A wicker basket? The bottom was held up by small squeaky wheels, similar to a shopping cart. What? Where was he? Some weird storage room? He reached over the lip of the basket and grabbed something that felt soft. He snatched his hand back at first, calling out, "Hello?" But when he reached back in, he realized that it wasn't another person. It was clothes. He grabbed onto the closest one and began to yank it out, holding it high up off the ground as the rest of it swung down and brushed against his knees, bigger than he was. He could recognize the texture of a hoodie, setting it down and deciding to pull the basket and dump it over. A wad of clothes spilled out in front of him, and even though he couldn't see any of it, the smells of different people were mixed together in the air, most of them sweaty and sticky like someone had rubbed a wet lollipop into the fabric. What was going on here? Where was he? Was this where Vanessa had taken... He slammed that thought to a halt. He moved along further into the room, holding his arms out, trying not to trip on the pile of jackets, dumping over more and more baskets that he found lined up on the walls. Most of the contents were clothes, but he felt sharp plastic corners bang into his shin, growing confused for a little bit before he felt that it was a toy truck. Small rubbery shoes were there too, a few beaded necklaces curled around a pair of thick glasses, a baseball cap settling beside his ankles as he began to kick around the spilled contents and sift through them. It didn't take him long to figure out where he must be. Lost and found. He actually laughed to himself at the irony of that name in his situation, trying to calm his jittering nerves. In reality, Gregory was terrified out of his mind, but he was desperately treading above the floodwater of useless panic, forcing himself to act instead. He couldn't be scared, not now. Gregory just stood there in the dark, surrounded by those piles, trying to think of what to do, his new outpouring of sweat making his shirt stick to him. Think. Come on, he had to think. He didn't have the blaster gun. He hadn't been able to take it out of the arena without it shutting off. And he didn't have a trash compactor either. But Vanessa was a human. Even though she was inside of the suit, she was still a fleshy human. And that suit was big and heavy. If he just tripped her up and she fell, she might have a concussion waiting for her. It wasn't his best, but it was all that he had. It was either this or curl up on the floor and cry. So, Gregory began to feel around in the dark, hitting his head a few times on the baskets and dragging out what he thought could work with his plan. He began to tie together the sleeves of the biggest hoodies that he could find, righting the baskets and pushing them out towards the walls again, making sure to clear the space so none of the clothes would cushion the impact. With that intention in mind, he started to move the toys right in front of the door. A few toy cars, a doll, a plastic truck, anything that would make it difficult for her to get up again. It was hard to do all of this without much light, fumbling around and tripping over his own things, but eventually it all started to fit into place. In the middle of dragging one of the baskets to a different spot, his head struck something so sharp and heavy he fell to the floor. Right after he cried out, something shifted on the thing that he had hit, and after a wash of air, something crashed down beside him, only barely avoiding his arm, shattering on impact. Seeing stars, Gregory rubbed the throbbing spot on his scalp, reaching up with his hand to brush against the underside of whatever he had run into. It had been a table. That didn't match his original picture of the room. He reached to feel the thing that had wobbled and fallen, the thing laid out beside him, much too close for comfort. Whatever it was, it could have broken his arm if it had fallen only 2 inches closer. His finger scraped against something plastic with clicking keys, then against something else that slid whenever he pushed it. A mouse and a keyboard. And judging by the wire-filled back of a rectangle about as long as his arm, he was getting an idea of what that desk had been for. Gregory felt himself grinning in the dark. He reached further, taking the big flat computer, yanking the socket out of the wall, dragging it down towards the door. It was literally the only weapon that he had, unless if he wanted to beat her with a fidget spinner. Gregory had more planned in his head, his brain going faster than his body, doubting that this was enough, but he soon ran out of time. Footsteps. Large, clunking footsteps from outside the room, getting closer and closer to the thin outline that was the door. Another rush of terror overcame him, the confidence in this ridiculous Home Alone charade falling apart. His eyes began to sting, throat squeezing shut, and he had to strain against the reflex to start crying again. He grinded his teeth, seething quietly to himself and smacking his fist into his forehead to try and knock himself out of it. He wasn't going to be scared anymore. Not now. He spent this entire night whining and crying and screaming. He couldn't stand being scared of this place a moment longer. He had to fight. It was the only way out. He had to fight. You're not gonna kill me, he started to whisper to himself, trying to calm himself down, fiddling with the tied-up sleeves of the hoodies that he was holding on to. You're not gonna kill me, you off-brand Easter bunny. Come on, you want some of this? I knocked out a crazy turkey and an insecure dog 10 times the size of you. You think I'm done? He wanted to laugh at his own dumb jokes, but at this point, all that he could hope for was a brief distraction from the tension to make sure that he didn't burst into tears. The footsteps reached the door. They knocked. He lost his bravery all over again, a tremor running up through his body, the thoughts in his head sparking and flying off and crashing into each other as he tried to keep up the facade on the outside. Think of James, he told himself, not daring to speak aloud anymore with her so close. Think of James. He had to be brave for James. The knocking turned into a jarring clang. Gregory being scared was what got them into this situation. James was never scared. Another clang. Another, louder each time. The floor shook with the next thud. He took in a shaky breath, his heart trying to brute force its way out of his ribcage, his veins feeling like they were flowing with molten lava. A longer pause. The door buckled, bits of light peeking through. Soon, all of his muscles tensed. He held his breath, his grip tightening around the sleeves of the hoodies. Soon, any second now, come on. And then, finally, the door busted open, clattering to the floor, letting the dim gray light pour in. The person who had broken down the door tumbled in with their momentum, stumbling. Everything went red, all noise cutting out to static in his ears. Gregory yanked on the loop of hoodies that he had tied together, the circle of fabric snapping tight over the ankles of the giant metal person that had come through the door. He pulled with all of the might that he had in his tiny body, and the figure came crashing down on top of the busted door, the plastic toys slipping beneath them, making them roll forwards awkwardly across the floor. And now Gregory was dragging the computer up, lifting it as high as he could, ready to bring it down on the back of her head. But it wasn't her head. Gregory stopped himself at the last second, wobbling with the weight of the computer in his hesitation, as he realized the giant metal person wasn't covered in white plating. He was orange, wearing a dark pink jacket, much bulkier and fuzzier than the White Rabbit had ever been. Comet blue eyes turned towards him in the dark, completely dazed, a tiny top hat askew as he said, "Whoa, what? Gregory?" Gregory dropped the computer, letting its screen crack as it hit the ground, the thing only narrowly avoiding crushing his toes. "Freddy!" All of the building adrenaline that had packed together into this fight-or-flight response was released the moment that he recognized who it was, jumping on top of the big robotic bear and giving him the biggest hug that he could muster. Relief came in a rushing tide, the ringing in his ears disappearing. He held onto Freddy tight, so glad that he had been wrong, so glad that he didn't have to spend one more moment alone in the dark. "Gregory!" Freddy yelped, trying to get up and faltering as he tried to brace himself against a toy car, which slipped out from under them and sent them both falling back to the floor. "Are you okay? What happened? I thought I heard a big crash over here and you weren't responding, and..." Freddy finally managed to get up enough to sweep him up into a desperately tight embrace, saying, "I'm so sorry! What happened to you? How did you get in here?" Gregory still had his face buried in the fur-covered chest, not really responding quite yet, still getting whiplash from everything that just happened. Freddy shifted into a better position, his chin leaving the top of Gregory's head as he looked around. What is all this?" "I'm so sorry. This is all meant for Vanessa." Gregory blurted out, laughing tearfully as he drew back and looked around at the mess of discarded clothes and toys and broken plastic bracelets. She was coming to finish me off, and I didn't want to let her, so I... He waved that off, unsure if this would have even worked, but still too relieved to really care. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm just so glad you found me. Wait, what? Freddie leaned away, still holding his shoulders, eyes wide and ears pinned back. What did you say about Vanessa? Oh. Gregory slowed down, the goofy smile fading from his face. He was invaded by memories. Roxy's obedience, the purple chip, the white rabbit's gleaming red eyes, her voice. But what if Freddie got mad? What if he yelled at him? What if he hit him? Immediately, his throat tried to close up, his mind racing to try and find an excuse. He had to let go of him, look decent, look submissive. But then he stopped roughly, blinking down at the purple carpet, going over what just happened. He didn't want to do this anymore. No matter what his mom wanted him to be like, he didn't want to stay out of trouble and be quiet and sit down and let everything happen to him with no objections. And he didn't want to lie this time, just to seem nicer to an adult, just to avoid getting punished. This was more important than that. The Pizzaplex had changed him after only a few hours in here, and even though he was scared that he would be hurt for it, the thought of James pushed that away. He didn't want to be like that anymore. That was what had caused all of this in the first place. So, turning back to look up at Freddie, Gregory told him carefully, Freddie, Vanessa is the white rabbit. Freddie drew back again, blinking at him in confusion. What do you mean? I was right, Gregory said, squirming uncomfortably from how hurt Freddie looked at the news. I'm sorry, but she spoke directly to me. She's not another animatronic. She's in some sort of big mech suit. She was the one making Moon and Chica and Roxy attack me. She chipped them before getting to you. She was the one doing it all. Freddie only gaped, disbelief flickering between betrayal and sorrow. Are you sure? He stammered. Roxy addressed her by name, Gregory told him carefully. Her voice was definitely Vanessa's. No, you have to be wrong. She wouldn't... He looked away, different emotions quavering over his face in spastic intervals. Eventually, Freddie snapped his eyes and mouth shut, hugging Gregory close again. Gregory buried himself in his warm arms, seeking any amount of comfort that he could reach. He was safe with Freddie. Everything would be okay as long as he stayed right here in Freddie's arms. We should get you out of here, Freddie said, voice still spaced out. If Vanessa's coming back for you... Freddie got up, pulling Gregory to his feet, holding one of his hands tight. Even with that support, Gregory was too shaky to walk. He fell the moment that his injured foot met the floor, wooziness nearly knocking him the rest of the way down. Freddie leaned down, reaching to him. Oh, are you okay? Gregory breathed on the floor, every joint in his body full of tremors. Where did this come from? Just a minute ago, he was getting ready to fight back against a possible serial killer, and then almost cracked a computer over Freddie's head. But now, with that horrible, dangerous presence gone, his energy had completely dried up. It was probably something about adrenaline, he thought dizzily. No, he admitted. Here, I can carry you, Freddie told him, scooping him off the floor with gentle hands. Again, he tucked him into his riding compartment. This time, Gregory didn't mind. It felt safe in there somehow. It was a little space hidden away from danger where nobody could hurt him. Gregory closed his eyes, leaning his head against the inner walls, listening to Freddie exiting out of the halls, making his way back to... Gregory wasn't sure where, really. He assumed the lobby, but after what happened to Vanessa, it felt like their objective should change, like they had to go after her. They couldn't just ignore this. Gregory shut down those thoughts. He didn't want to think about it right now. He just kept his eyes closed, shutting out the world. He just wanted to wake up already. Freddie stopped not very far away, bringing Gregory back to reality. I was gone because I went off to go get you some food while you're in Roxy's arena, he explained. I knew you'd be really hungry by now. The hatch opened up. Freddie took him out and set him on the ground gently, keeping a paw on him for support. The rest of the mall splayed out all around them, full of gift shops and other smaller attractions like carousels or golf courses or bumper cars. All of it was muted and gray, the colors not daring to make it through against the black of night. The cold tiles had speckles of white moonlight dusted around. The space opened up with various decorative fountains lined up all the way down Main Street, all turned off and standing for now. Everything was dead, the usual joy of the place now gaping into an empty cavern, like a bucket of oil that had been spilled all over it to choke it out. Right now, they were stored in a hiding spot between a ticket booth and a theater hall, part of the attraction itself. He tensed, sensing movement in every shadow. It was only the staff bots going through the nightly cleanup routine. They had dustpans, vacuums, window wipers, all working together in robotic coordination to get the place ready for the next day. A few of the staff bots raised their heads, watching them across the mall with star-shaped eyes, but they eventually went back to their work, ignoring them. He turned his gaze away from the dark halls, picking up the scent of a tray that Freddy had left behind when coming to save him. It was a plate with a corn dog and an assortment of chips next to a bottle of water. His hunger and thirst grew painful, forcing him to immediately begin to scarf it down. He tried to be slow, not wanting to make himself sick, draining the water bottle first and finishing off half the corn dog before slowing down. Freddy kept watch as Gregory ate, eyes scanning over the surroundings, ears pricked at attention. Once Gregory was finished, he was feeling a little better, getting up and testing out his hurt foot while Freddy threw away the trash. The energy was returning to his aching insides little by little, finally letting him catch up with himself. "We need to go to Monty's place soon," Freddy told him, catching his attention again. "Do you think you're ready for that?" Gregory's spirits faded at that. He cleared his throat, mumbling, "I'm sorry, I can't. I'm so tired." Freddy glanced around anxiously, lavender earring flicking in the pale moonlight. I don't want to force you to go back into danger so soon," he said, but Vanessa is still active. I don't know why, but something's going on with her. I don't know where she is or how long it'll take before she realizes that you're gone." The dreaded answer crept up behind him, stirring up his thoughts unhappily. "Monty is the last thing to do before you can leave. If we just keep trying, you'll be out of here, and you won't have to worry about Vanessa anymore." He trailed off, then sighed, ashamed eyes turning back on him. "I'm so sorry about all this, Gregory," he said. "This is much more difficult for you than I originally thought it would be. You've been through so much." Seeing Gregory's growing fears, Freddy batted those thoughts away, saying, "We can probably stay here for a break, though. You need to get some of your strength back." Gregory nodded, flopping down against the wall, not caring that the tiles were hard and cold. Freddy settled beside him, hugging an arm around him. Gregory leaned into his warmth, closing his eyes. Safe. He was safe. Freddy was here. The break was nice for a while. Without running off of adrenaline, Gregory really began to feel the tug of fatigue. His eyes were sticky and unfocused, weakness making every part of him shiver. He could hardly keep his head up, his entire body too heavy, thoughts slow and buzzing with sleepiness. He wanted more than ever to sneak into a dream, to give in and let the world be swept away, even if it was just for a few minutes. Right as he started to drift off, he heard something that sent chills up his spine. Breathing. Gregory's eyes snapped open. It was definitely not his, accompanied by the same heartbeat. It was close. "What is it?" Freddy asked, noticing his tension. We should go," Gregory stammered out, trying to break out of the hold of sleep. "I'm ready now." The break ended. Freddy gingerly helped Gregory to his feet, guiding him out of the hiding spot, back through the halls on either side of Monty's attraction to return to the main lobby. He couldn't hear the heart anymore. Gregory didn't want to think about it, not for 1 second. He just wanted to escape from it before it caught up to him. Just go, just get out, just get it over with. They stopped in front of Monty's place, the air fizzing with approaching heat, invisible ants crawling up his legs. But Freddy hesitated this time whenever they approached Monty's door. Monty's attractions were mostly prize-based like Roxy's. Plushy versions of the animatronics stared at him, unblinking from the shadows. The dark silhouettes of buckets gathered behind stands where a kid could get their face painted. Little toy versions of carts were stacked on display, their bright colors reduced to dull grays and blacks in the night. The whole thing was Western themed, each stall decorated with iron and wood, fake cactuses sprouting from clay pots on every corner. Monty's impending image towered above it all. A gold tooth shone out of Monty's grinning gator mouth, catching the starlight. Monty's Raceway. Freddy still didn't let go of Gregory. He turned, stomach dropping whenever he saw his expression. The bear was chewing on his lip, ears pressed flat against his head as he stared up at Monty's image. The floor was vibrating. Gregory listened carefully, then regretted it. Something was going on in there. Something was knocking things over behind those dark doors, crushing metal until it cracked, throwing things against the walls. It was muffled greatly by the doors, but it was enough to freeze them both in place. It'll be fine, right? Gregory broke in. Freddy didn't respond at first. Gregory, I don't know what the chip has done to Monty, he said slowly, but even without it, he's never quite fit in with us. Ever since Bonnie. Freddy's voice hitched into silence. His fear was joined by another emotion. Sadness. Painful sadness. Who's Bonnie? Gregory asked cautiously. Freddy sighed. You haven't heard of him? Not really, Gregory shrugged. Monty wasn't always here, Freddy explained, each word slow and careful like he was walking on a tightrope. Before him, we had Bonnie. This part of the lobby used to be his bowling alley. What happened to him? Gregory prodded. Our managers scrapped him, Freddy said emptily. He wasn't perfect enough for them. He glanced back up at Monty's sign. I don't come here often. I miss him. Gregory swallowed anxiously. I'm sorry, he said, unsure what to do. It's okay. Freddy gathered himself up again. He kneeled down at Gregory's level, still holding him by the shoulders. His comet-bright gaze was filled with shivering worry, jaw tight and forehead crinkling. The crashes from inside Monty's place continued, sending tremors up into his shoeless foot. I don't want to frighten you, Freddy said, leaning a bit to keep on holding his gaze. I just want to warn you. Be very, very careful. I have no doubt that Monty is chipped as well. If you feel like you're in danger, just leave and come right back to me out here. We can't evade Vanessa all night, but if you really think it's too dangerous in there, run out as fast as you can. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Gregory said. He stood up again, pushing Gregory to the door, urgency lighting up his form as he glanced back around the quiet lobby. And whatever you do, Freddy added, stay out of the water. Incident reports. On August 10th, 2076, Bonnie was injured because a rack of bowling balls fell apart on top of him. He was luckily able to pull the child out of the way, but in turn took serious damage. As usual, he was taken to parts and services to be repaired, where the technicians discovered that his paralyzing/numbing switch was broken. Instead of finding some other solution, the head technician by the name of Duke Madden decided to go through with the procedure anyway, with Bonnie simply restrained to the table. After Bonnie was fixed, he was sent back out to finish his duties for the day, but ended up breaking down into tears because of what he had just been put through, leaving his post to seek comfort from Freddy. Freddy alerted the managers of what happened, and Bonnie Bowl was closed for the rest of the day as an investigation went underway. Assessment. Duke Madden was fired immediately. Make it clear to all employees that if they decide to go through with the procedure without numbing the animatronics, they will be fired on the spot. I don't care if they'll have to be out of commission for a few days. I don't care how much money we will lose. Do not start a procedure without paralyzing them first. Victor Miller. On October 11th, 2076, Bonnie spontaneously passed out while carrying a child around, and accidentally broke her leg by landing partially on top of her. When taken to parts and services, there didn't appear to be anything wrong with him. He was fully charged and his paralyzing switch hadn't been pulled by grabby fingers. Upon waking up, Bonnie admitted to not being able to fall asleep or stay asleep for the past month. Assessment: monitor movement at night to discover the origin of the insomnia. Victor Miller. Patch requests. Freddy needs a new Fazwatch, and it needs to be waterproof this time. Son needs to be able to repair and clean himself instead of needing to go to parts and services every day. Need to improve Son's new ribbons. A child choked on one of his bells after it fell off. Parents are asking about what their child should expect from a fire situation. We'll figure out fire drill aspect in a way that won't let the animatronics run off. Ignore my brother in the background, he's playing video games in another room. So, hey everyone, we got another break chapter before Monty. I'm really excited about what I have planned for him. The rewrite is going to get really crazy after that. Also, don't worry if you're thinking that we're nearing the end of the rewrite. We are nowhere close. There is 44 chapters in this thing. We are not just shutting down after Monty. There is so much other stuff that goes on, so, you know, don't be sad about this just because we're at Monty. That doesn't mean that it's over. We are not even close to done yet, so... yeah, I'll still be able to post the next chapter next Friday, so, you know, be ready then. So, yep, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye!